What's going on, everybody? Matt Malatesta. You know this other face on the other side of the line, Michael Kane, the head coach at Dripping Springs. Also, the faces of Texas VBI. You need volleyball information across the state of Texas. This is your guy. We are ready to talk some volleyball. We are, let's call it mid-season. I mean, we're getting down and dirty here because the tournament season was wild. District has started. We're kind of in that first round, going to be looping around for round two. For you, bam, playoff start. Coach, you know, talk about where do you see, here's how I see it. Dallas is dominating. What the heck is going on in Dallas?
Which is, I think Dallas is
statewide.
Yeah, I think Dallas is a little angry about the success I think the Houston and Austin areas have had in recently, and I think they've got a little chip on their shoulder. But yeah, I mean, I think what can be said in general across the state regarding, you know, most of the levels, you've got a few teams that, again, in my humble opinion, and if I've offended anybody, I apologize. I think a few teams that really stand out, one or two in each classification, and then there's a ton of parity. And I mean, we played everybody from Allen to Lake Travis to, Arlen, and we played a ton of people. And I mean, I just feel like on any given night, you know, if the right team shows up, in most cases, obviously your Byron Nelson is up in the Dallas area, and it is, you know, kind of running away with everybody thinking it's just going to be a shoe-in for them. But, you know, and of course, the D1, D2, you got people that are going to be separate. So until there are some districts that aren't completely set, so you're kind of waiting to find out what happens with those certain teams. Byron Nelson has an NFL side chance of moving to D1, but I think they'll be D2. But again, they're their favorite. They haven't lost. And of course, Coach Curlick has got some amazing leadership with Sophie Peterson and Ashley Glegner and Riley Glegner on the outside, and Ashlyn as well. Those kids are just bringing some really, really, really good volleyball to the table. But outside of those one or two teams in each classification, I felt like there's been some real parity across the state. But I agree. I think Dallas is really shaking things up because all the way from your 6A, from Byron Nelson, you got McKinney North, Aledo, Highland Park, and Lovejoy, all kind of leading the front as far as our calls are concerned in 5A. And then you've got Decatur and Eagle Mountain, leading the area in the 4A. And so I just think, again, those teams are really starting to separate themselves. But the Dallas is a mess too. Every night's a kind of a crapshoot on who's going to take home a win or loss. So it's interesting.
I do love the competitive nature of it. And, you know, down here in Houston, we're seeing teams like, you know, Dawson emerge. They get a big transfer. They're having a huge season. And then, you know, of course, you got Grand Oaks and Hallie Thompson there. She gets back from, you know, playing overseas with Team USA, and now they're rolling again. But you've got, you know, Ridge Point is kind of the same way. Jaden Robinson is back. But there is some balance. You know, I do love the playoff system, and I want to talk about that with you. I love the playoff system because it gives more opportunity, and maybe apples are playing apples and oranges are playing oranges for the most part. Coaches didn't love it just because of the way you have to travel, or the state Final Four is not really a state Final Four because, you know, what is your take on it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you like the more opportunities that people get? What are the pitfalls for coaches?
You know, having won it in 2022, which was the last year that there was only 6 classifications, there wasn't D1, D2. And that was our first time being in 6A. You know, we'd won it in 5A and moved up to 6A. And a lot of people were like, well, would you be able to mimic the same success at the 6A level? And I think we proved people that we could at least compete on that level. But I think there was something nostalgic about saying you're the division, you're the 6A state champs. As a coach, there's always this like, you want to make sure you're the best. And it doesn't mean the best team always wins, because as you and I both know, we get to the state tournament. You got upsets along the way. When you get to the state tournament, you can throw all other statistics out the window. And we've seen some big underdogs take on some Goliaths, if you will, in the past. You know, Kingwood Park out of Houston would come to mind when they beat Lovejoy, who was the front runner favorite to win it in that time, and they kind of came out, I don't want to say nowhere, but I think that was a big shock for a lot of people. But to make that it was like there was a definitive state champion, right? There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of still question marks as to who the real 6A or 5A or 4A state champion is. I completely agree with the numbers and allowing more kids the opportunity because, I mean, you get the schools like the Allen, so to speak, that have, 6,000 plus kids or whatever you parallels, if you will, competing with the small 6A schools. And you can do that across each classification and say, look at the largest versus the smallest in that classification. I think for me personally, I would have liked to see them add a 7A. We feel like there's that much growth and stuff. Add another 7A. You've got 7As in your Floridas and your Georgias and stuff like that. A lot of these places have 7As and make a separation in that way. It kind of thins stuff out, so to speak, but it makes it a little bit more. I don't know. I like to have one definitive state champ. That's just me because again, I'm a competitor and I don't want there to be any question as to who is the best, right? Maybe it's the best for that weekend. I'm also not a huge fan of the separate because we added all these teams. I've been part of the conversations, not making any kind of decisions whatsoever because I would do it differently. But I'm not a huge fan of like separating the four, the Final Four out of the Garland area. And before that, it was South, San Marcos, and I'll make my plug that they should bring it back to Austin and play in the Moody Center and got all kinds of parking and stuff like that. So that's just my plug. But I think it takes away the unique and special joy and honor and privilege and rarity of getting to a Final Four. I mean, there's some coaches that have 600, 700, 800 wins and never been to the Final Four. A lot of people don't know that. There's some coaches that have tons of wins that haven't made it to the regional final. So I think along the way, I mean, each level should be celebrated. And I think because we separated it, there's 3 classifications, they couldn't make it all fit in one, 3-4 day period. So they pulled out the Final Four, and I felt, in a lot of senses, it felt like just another game. And I think they're going to make some adjustments to kind of mitigate some of those feelings. But, you got a lot of coaches who made it to the state Final Four for their first time, and they're playing in Little Town, USA high school gym, and you're going, what in the world? And then all of a sudden, having been blessed to have been in a state Final Four and losing, and I say it as a blessing because even getting there was a blessing, but to lose, it was still felt special. You were awarded this giant trophy. The kids got medals. And it reminded me a lot of 2021 when my team went to the state semifinals, and that was during the COVID year. And they did the same thing. They pulled us out. We wound up playing full share at Katy in the semifinals. And, we lost to full share. Sydney did a great job and had a great team at near. As soon as we lost, I was like, all right, girls, line up. Ready to go. And they're like, no, we don't have medals with New LMG. I'm like, what? So there's a lot of nostalgia that I think comes with us. And you lose that. I know they've made some adjustments, so I think that's at least headed in the right direction. I know they've got to look out for all the different classifications and all this. There's not just one set reason. But I think there's room for improvement. I think they are going to make some good changes, and hopefully it will at least make these kids feel special. But I sure would like to see somehow, some way, some shape that they would make it so that Final Four is the Final Four. And I have solutions, but
you got solutions.
I got solutions. I don't just complain.
Okay, so we went Dallas, Houston. Let's talk ATX. Big time ball there.
Yeah.
Y'all, Georgetown, Cedar.
Yeah.
Apps balling. Just talk about what is the landscape like there in the Austin area.
Sure. I think anytime you're mentioning Austin right now, if you're not talking about, the Austin High Maroons and what they've got. I mean, they've got just an incredible lineup, with Camille Presley in the middle. They've got just studs. They've got a transfer setter that was, I don't want to say the missing link, but they were the setting position wasn't at the same level as the rest of their teammates, but they've got a USC stud outside commit on the outside. They've got a Texas commit in the middle. They've got, they are loaded, and they beat us. They just beat Lake Travis last week. They're having a fantastic season. So I think, a district, which is really difficult, they've come out and jumped ahead of the game, so to speak, and they beat Westlake. They had a big week last week. They beat Westlake and Lake Travis in the same week. So right after beating us. So, they went bang, 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 just knocked out, in theory, what was used to be the big three, if you will. So I think they're a front runner in Austin for sure, and people need to be talking about them more. Lake Travis got the transfer of Gentry Barker. You put Gentry Barker, who came from Lovejoy, on any team, and it makes them instantly a contender in some capacity, because she's that good. And Brandis Boyd does a really good job out there. But I think Cedar Park's starting to gain some traction as well. And I think people are good. They've obviously got some stud kids out there. But Richland Rock's also doing some good things out there. And Chrissy's got some good stuff out there. So they're turning some heads. But the Austin High, I think, has been a big shock of the shot. I think, again, respectfully, Dripping Springs team hasn't been as successful as it has been. I mean, we've had, like a lot of people, we mentioned before how like Thompson and all those kids, Henley being gone for the first couple of weeks, or we had Sydney that was out. We had the loss to, an early grad. I think that was the first we've had that, where Krista Wilburn is at SMU now. She wound up graduating this summer instead of playing out her senior year. So, we're starting to finally gain some practice. We'll see if we can't make a late run, but I think the talk of the town right now is Austin for sure.
That is cool. San Antonio, it's got some teams over there. It's kind of top heavy. Just, over in the San Antonio area, who's kind of carrying the torch for them?
Again, I think you have to start talking about your Reagans with, they got an stud outside at Kennedy Kreider and led by Laura Garcia. They've got a lot of really, really good, talented kids there. Rachel gets the most out of those kids. One thing you always know about these San Antonio teams is that those kids work. You're always going to get a lot. So I think the front runners in that area are definitely Reagan, and then Harlan. Like Monica Gonzalez is the coach out there. She's always does a fantastic job. She's got Nyla Randall on the outside. It's just, they're going to go as far as she takes them. And obviously their defense is always really loaded. I think if you go into the 5A and below, you've got your outer outskirts, your Davenports, your Pipers, your Braunfels Canyon, and Braunfels is having a really strong season as well, which is just on the north of San Antonio. So I hate to lump them in, but in between, no one knows whether to put them at ATX or the San Antonio. I think for most intents purposes, they're usually lumped in with those San Antonio teams. And so I think, in the 6A, Braunfels has really made a big statement this year. I think they're a team that kind of a dark horse. I don't even know if they're dark horse, because I believe they were in the regional tournament last year. And King is doing a fantastic job. They locked horns with Buda Johnson the first time, and it was a 5-game. The scores were something crazy, like 31, 28, 26. It was just a 5-set barn burner, which you knew it was going to come down to Johnson and King. So they got the first Olympic at Kingdom, and I think they'll both do some good stuff in the respective classifications.
Coach, I got to tell you this. I love what ESPN has done with college freaking volleyball. Dude, I turn every game I watch. And you're a pro and you know volleyball. I don't know crap about volleyball. But what I do know is every time I watch a game, there's kids that we have covered for 4 years all over the landscape of college volleyball. This is a loaded question, but does Texas, where would you rank if you had to rank 50 states? Where did they rank as it relates to the great high school volleyball that goes to college, that goes to pro? Where would we land?
And respectful to, of course, everybody else, and obviously we live in Texas, but if without one, we're 1A and 1B. Between California, in my opinion, and us, obviously you got some Midwest school, but it's sheer numbers. I don't know that you can compete with the numbers of talent that Texas is actually throwing out on an annual basis. And, and it's just an endless list of people. If I'm not mistaken, we have 4 or 5 kids on a U.S. State U19 team from Texas. And, and that says a lot in itself when you talk about the top 12 kids in the country, and 5 of them are from Texas. So I think if that isn't a statement in itself, I don't know what would be. But the only other team state that is producing the amount of athletes that on those types of numbers would be California, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, if like I said, if we're not, I know we're from Texas, so it's easy to brag about Texas, but it's kind of, the numbers don't lie, and it speaks to the talent that's there. If we're not one, we're 1A and 1B, someone with California, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really cool to see it. And I know you've seen all of these kids. We've just kind of seen the greater Houston area kid, but, even Spears over at UT, a huge name. And, Cassie O'Brien at Kentucky, she's starting to kind of get rolling too. But, I mean, it's super cool. Pro leagues, do they got to consolidate this? What are they going to do?
Yeah, I can't keep up with the bird. It's trying to figure out which ones, I would like to see. Again, this is mine, and I'm literally at a Little League 6A Dripping Springs high school coach. I'm not anybody of importance. But in my opinion, I think I love, number one, that we have professional volleyball in the U.S. now, because you hear all these kids having an opportunity to go to Europe and things of that nature. So I think it's uber cool that we're keeping them stateside, if you will. The fact that we've got a couple different organizations is a little confusing. I would have loved to have seen, if we really, in my opinion, if we wanted to make a serious push, it should have been just one organization. Everybody figured out to kind of go all in, to kind of release. I don't know. I mean, you look at the basketball. You don't have a WNBA and then another organization running and so on. This just should be one. And so it's a little confusing. So I don't know why or how, and certainly have no knowledge to any of that entity in regards to the one is in the, why did they start that, and why didn't we just focus on one entity? That's up way above my pay grade. But personally, I'd like to see them have just one.
I would too. And it is cool. And even here's the thing, like, volleyball is very watchable. The WNBA can sometimes be watchable, but volleyball, so cool is the kids are so cool. Like, they have big personalities. They understand. They can connect the marketing piece to it also. And we take Allie Batenhorst, for example, in Seven Lakes. She may have been the best player that's ever come out of here as it relates to the VYPE era, let's call it. She goes to Nebraska, then she goes to USC, and now she's playing, and now she's doing beach. But these kids are that close to becoming mainstream influencers, let's call it, or micro influencers. How cool is that? And do you recognize the upside that's happening right now?
Cool. Again, as a coach, I've been doing this for over 2 decades. I hate to say that because it just shows my age. But yeah, you just love that the girls are having opportunities to kind of, take their God-given talent and ability, and starting to make a career out of it. And more importantly, making an impact from a sponsorship standpoint and from visibility, and because there's just so many amazing kids that you get the opportunity to talk to and deal with, and you're right about the personalities. I've had the pleasure of doing podcasts with an Aiden Ames and with I did one with Howie yesterday, so hopefully that'll come out, and with Brunelli, and these are your high school kids, Caroline Frehilda, which was a really cool podcast. I had an opportunity to do that. That young lady just really wowed me. So yeah, I think these kids are so blessed. We had such a great era of volleyball players in the last decade that just didn't have the opportunities that these young ladies are going to have, which was unfortunate because we had some mega stars back in the day, and but I think it's exciting for these girls, and I think part of that's going to come with also educating the girls on how to handle that and how to direct that in the positive direction as well. Because I've got to start learning that everything that they do, every word that they comes out of their mouth, everything that they text or put on social media is going to be, looked at with a fine-tooth comb, and they're going to be judged by everything that comes out. So, I mean, I'm hoping that I know some of the college coaches are doing a good job, from my understanding, in bringing in people to educate their players and athletes about how to handle the notoriety and the fame, because it's become a lot more visible. To your point earlier, talking about ESPN, and I mean, I don't know that there's not a night that I'd ever go on to ESPN Plus and go find a game that I missed, and purchase the extra subscription so I could go back and see what they're doing. But more importantly, I think it's really cool hearing all these kids from Texas, this player from Texas, and you just kind of go, oh yeah, I remember that kid. I competed against that kid, but now they're on TV all the time, and that just wasn't the case. So I love that ESPN has really taken the bull by the horns and recognized the growth of the sport. It's the fastest growing sport. It's a fantastic sport. I know we coach it, so it's easy to say that, but I mean, it's constant energy going. You go, I mean, we got season tickets to the Texas Longhorns, and they had a game at the Moody Center, which was 10,000 plus, and it was just a arena with just loud. It was awesome, and I just think about what that would be like in every venue. So it has to be special. These kids got to be excited about the growth of what we're.
No, it's awesome. We'll pivot to this. You also own a club and you're very entrenched in the club volleyball world. So are these kids playing too much? How do you protect against it? Because it's really, you have a very great vantage point being a high school coach and doing a lot of club work. How did these merge? Do they merge? Should they merge? Is it too much? Is the recruiting too hard? Meaning, they're in gyms and they're playing these club games and there's like 50 coaches and it can be very stressful. What's more fun? They can go play like a Dig Pink game for College Park and have, 1,500 fans having a great time, and it's very much more relaxed. Explain what is the connection? How does this all connect as it relates to year-round volleyball?
Well, again, I am fortunate to have my hand in both the club world and the high school world. I get asked all the time, which one do you like better? I've had the good fortune of winning a national championship, two actually in club with 12s and a 16s age group, and then I've won state championships. And while they're both very special, and all those kids that I've had a chance to coach have been amazing, and we still talk about it and keep in touch and have fond memories of all that. I don't know that you can even touch what playing in Garland or in a big packed. We played last year. We played Cornerstone at our gym, and we were both nationally ranked. And we had 1,500, 2,000 people, and it was a pretty cool environment. And you win a national championship, and yes, it's really cool. You're playing on the big stage and the colored court and all the things, and you're playing in front of, your family, a brother that's probably on his iPad not paying attention. If you're lucky, he is paying attention. At the higher levels, you start to see bigger crowds of people that are there, but they're kind of more observers versus fans. And I think fanatics are something that brings an element that the club just doesn't have, right? You have bigger, the little stadiums are there, which are great, but there's not fans there. There are people just lovers of the game, or teams that happen to be in the gym and want to go watch the game. They're more observing and with no typical real side to pick from. So I don't know that you can compare the two, having played both at the highest level and competed in both at the highest level. I don't think there's any comparison. I mean, high school playoffs, state championship environment, I remember getting into the first state championship, Final Four, playing in Prosper. I think Prosper was brand new. This was before all the other Prosper schools there. Dripping Springs hadn't been there in 20 years, and we marched into the gym and at the Volleyball Center up in Garland, and all of a sudden it felt like an endless line of white T-shirts with a big Prosper P on it marched in there. They were in unison with the chants and the cheers, and you just kind of like, oh my gosh! Even I, as a coach, was trying not to be distracted, but it was fantastic. So from that standpoint, I don't know that there is a comparison. Are we playing too much? 1,000,000%, absolutely yes. Is a slippery slope ever going to stop? No. Unfortunately, people are making money in this, and once you start making money, you get jaded by this and in the club world, this arms race of trying to get the best kids. And every region is different. Every part of Texas has different rules and regulations, and there's under the table stuff going on. And you had Dallas was doing tryouts in April, which was crazy. Used to be when I first started club, you would do tryouts. You weren't allowed to do tryouts until November. You didn't start the season until January. I think someone's got to get control of it. I think USA Volleyball is starting to feel a little bit of heat, which is good. I think on the boys' end, they got pressure from the boys' side, who actually boycotted, to my understanding, the year before, because there was like, you guys are moving in too deep into July. We're not doing this. Like, when do these kids have a break? When do these coaches who coach both get a break? Mostly the kids. I mean, the coaches, you know, a lot of the club coaches don't coach high school, but for people like myself, when we don't stop. I mean, it's year round. But the kids are playing 50 plus matches in a high school season if you're on a high level. And also you're going straight into club the next week. And then that goes, what used to stop in May is now June, and now it's July, and they wanted it. So it is too much. And not to mention, people are doing 3 days a week practices and private lessons, and it's like, at what point? I mean, and I'm in the director of one of the clubs, and you know, I argue with even with the Malatesta staff, but we're guilty of having everything that everybody else. So it's not to say that we're not doing that, but I think the landscape has got to change, and I really challenge college coaches to help change it, because I think ultimately it comes down to them in changing it. And I'll tell you why. Last year, and I've had this conversations with many college coaches who would claim that they don't have a say so, but they proved to me that they did this past year. They're one of the big attractions of going to JOs is the recruiting component to it, right? You get there and it's the final thing of the season. Obviously, you go for a national championship, but there are hundreds and hundreds of college coaches at these events. And I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, they usually have a sequence of how it goes. You start with the littles, you know, the 12s, 13s, go all the way to 18s, and kind of have this coup de grace. They pull the 18s out. They do their own thing a little bit earlier in April. But they had them flipped differently. And I think college world got together and said, hey, what are you doing? We're in college camps during that time period. What are you doing? You need to move that. So they flipped it and made older kids, the 17s and 16s, earlier than the 14s and 15s. So that, because they're not necessarily recruiting 14s and 15s, but the 16s, the 17s were big markets, right? And so USA listened to them and flipped it because they were trying to accommodate. Because at the end of the day, if the college coaches are not going to JOs, I think you would see a lot of people say, we're done, we're not going to JOs. Enough is enough. You're already starting to have a lot of programs and start to look to just doing AAUs and not necessarily go to JOs just because it's too much. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, these kids are going all the way through, and when do their bodies rest? And both ends, your high school and your club ends, no one wants to concede, right? High school, a lot of pride, and you don't want to give up too much. So you got a lot of coaches that are old school, don't recognize, but you know, your more successful high schools, for the most part, have kids that are playing year-round, and that's just the nature of the beast. Doesn't mean that they're better coaches than we are. It just means that there's kids playing year-round. And if you looked at every one of these, your Eagle Mountains, your Goliaths, your Bushlers, all these kids, even in small programs, they're traveling to go practice somewhere in club year-round. Or your teams wouldn't look. The skill set that's happening right now is out of this world, which is another reason why I could go for days about this, by the way. But the college coaches, you know, they don't want them to stop. They complain about them being, you know, worn down horses. But, you know, I don't think Stanford was complaining when they had 5 starting freshmen on their national championship team. Like, those kids aren't starting or playing and winning national championship as freshmen if they're not playing as much club as they're playing, as much volleyball as they're playing. So the landscape is bad. I wish everybody would get together and kind of put some hard rules and regulations down. Laws, you know, but the problem is, again, USA does not control the money of all these clubs, and the money is going to lead everyone, unfortunately, right now. But I think college coaches could stop it. If college coaches says we're going nowhere in July, they would have to move JOs into July, into June.
All right, finally, because my Zoom is about running out relatively soon.
No, I could go for days. Sorry.
And then
You know, some hot topics I don't like.
I know.
I'm a busy day.
Any more off it? I mean,
We actually talk about it. Yeah, for sure.
if you were to give one piece of advice to a family and or kid and or parent about the recruiting process, it would be what?
I'm going to steal the words from, you know, Caroline Priota said these words to me, and I was mesmerized by the methodology that she used it when we talked about her her path. Holly mentioned it last night, which was her piece of advice. So I'm stealing the words of amazing young ladies, but it's genuinely profound, and it's something that parents should understand, and every kid out there needs to understand. And their statement was, comparison is a thief of joy. Don't compare your path and your track to anybody else's. Real quick, Caroline talked at length about, in her 12-year-old Blair Thiebaud walks into Houston Skyline's gym, and Caroline went from the starting 5-1 setter to a backup role to Blair, who's a studded girl, right? She's committed to Louisville, and Caroline could have quit or switched clubs or felt bad about herself, but she didn't want to lose out of her enjoyment of the game. So she told me, I wasn't trying to compare myself. I was focused on my own play and my enjoyment. I didn't want it to be stolen because I was too busy watching or worrying that Blair had already gotten her scholarship, et cetera, et cetera. And and she wound up going to Kentucky. And Holly said the same thing. Everybody's different. If you're the Holly Thompsons and the Henley Andersons of the world, your path looks a lot different than the mid-tier level players. And that's not a derogatory statement. I'm just saying there's the elite of the elite. And then you got some kids, the transfer portal impacts it. So don't be in a hurry. Be patient. Do your work. Reach out and all that stuff you've got to put in the time as a player, meaning on your own, emailing and whatnot. But be patient and not get worried when it's junior year, starting or in high school, you're worried about, oh my God, I haven't committed yet. I mean, I've had kids that have committed in April of their senior year to D1 schools with full rides. So comparison is a thief of joy. Don't worry or look around and get nervous because other people's path is a little bit different than yours.
Boom. That's on a t-shirt. Book it. All right. Matt Malatesta of VYPE. Michael Kane, the dean of high school volleyball around the state of Texas. I'm going to call him that.
Yeah,
about Dripping Springs, also big in the club world with his club in the Austin area. Coach, your content is elite as it relates to volleyball statewide. That's why we wanted to partner with you.
Sure.
We need to do this more often.
We do.
Sure, as we get closer to the postseason. Woo, it's going to be a ride.
It's going to be fun. I think the parity that we got this year is going to make this year just, I don't know that you can take anything for granted. I think you're literally going to be running to the phones to find out how everybody did because it's that kind of wide open race, which is going to be exciting. So
it's going to be so fun. All right, everybody, get out to a volleyball game. It's homecoming weeks. It's big camp. Yep. They got all kind of great themes for their weeks. Get out there, root these girls on, because you will see them on ESPN in the next.
That's right.
Bet on this.
If you're a middle school player, go out to a high school game. You should be at your high school games every single night. They're playing at home. So.
All right. We'll see all the games and call all of us on social media. We'll see you later.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Matt.